Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the United Stand. This is your countdown to kick-off for Manchester United away to Aston Villa in the Premier League. Could be a massive game in the bigger picture of Erik ten Hag's tenure at Manchester United. Lots of talk like if Ten Hag loses this game today, could it be the end of him at Manchester United? We're going to break everything down for you. There is a little bit of news that's just come in, a little bit of team news. People are already talking about it in the chat, so we will get into that. But I am joined by Usman. Usman, how are you doing, mate?
I'm not too bad. Loving the energy. First things first. Obviously, you know, good to be here with yourself. But yeah, as you mentioned, some big team news, of course. A lot of speculation regarding the starting lineup. There's a lot to discuss, my brother.
Yeah. First bit of team news for you. Beth is injured. Beth is ill, and I've had to come in to replace. But that isn't the only bit of team news. We are hearing that Harry Maguire and Johnny Evans are going to be starting for Manchester United today, which is massive news. Erik ten Hag dropping his two centre-backs that he has signed, Lisandro Martinez and Matthijs de Ligt, getting dropped after, let's be honest, an absolute shocker of a performance against Porto away. I mean, it was really bad, wasn't it? What do you think about Maguire and Evans?
I mean, it's a massive call. As you mentioned, his two players, I mean, De Ligt was his captain at Ajax as well, which is obviously even worse. I mean, Martinez, for me, hasn't been the same player post-injury. I love Martinez to bits. He's probably one of my favourite players. But we've got to be honest, he's not been nowhere near good enough. And to be fair to Erik ten Hag, we have been calling for him to make the big decisions, especially, you know, the so-called favourites. And he's made a big call, so I can't begrudge him for that. Of course, he'll have to down his sword if it doesn't pay off. So it's a massive call. We'll have to wait and see if it's the right one in time. But for me, I do understand the logic. Yeah,
well, we were saying off camera just before we went live, it almost feels like one last roll of the dice, doesn't it? You know, like we said, it could very well be his last game as Manchester United manager. It just feels like one last, you know, let's just see what happens. What have I got to lose now? Do you know what I mean? Everyone's kind of expecting us to go and get beat today, let's be honest. You know, as much as I want Manchester United to win, and in an ideal world, I'd like Erik ten Hag to turn it around and, you know, we get a win today and then we go for the international break and come back and get a nice run of wins. But I just don't see it happening, to be honest. I think if we come away with a point today, I think we'd have done well, especially with the form Aston Villa are in. I mean, Aston Villa have just beat Bayern Munich in the Champions League. When was the last time we beat a team of that ilk?
Yeah, I mean, our record against top 8 teams away from home in general isn't great. I mean, I can't recall the last time we actually got a result. I don't know the exact stats, but I can remember it was extremely damning, you know, for the way we have been under Erik ten Hag. On the flip side, obviously, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had the polar opposite sort of record against the way he was actually phenomenal. And the way he set us up in a counter-attacking manner is what I'm expecting from Manchester United today. For me, I'm going to be extremely surprised if we play a high line. I mean, as we know, Watkins got blistering pace. He's obviously fantastic in behind. He loves to play off the shoulder. It'll be very surprising if we play anything but a low block against Aston Villa. And hopefully, similar to what Ole used to do in these games, hit him on the counter-attack with the pace. Because the truth of the matter is, we just need to get the 3 points today. So regardless of the selection, he has to set us up properly. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, well, it goes back to when we did the forum against Porto, and I made a point where I actually believe we probably would benefit right now from setting up a little bit more, you know, pragmatic and, you know, trying to be a bit more of a, you know, sit back and just try and rough the game up a little bit, you know, rather than try and go and outplay teams. Because even Solskjaer had a thing where in his last season, he kind of set up against teams and we try and go toe-to-toe. Liverpool at Old Trafford is the one I'm thinking of, where, you know, we set up trying to go toe-to-toe and play football against them when those players just aren't as good as the other top teams, and we got battered. So you're probably better off going setting up a little bit more defensively. We used to do it against City all the time under Ole. Ole had a lot of luck against City by going setting up a little bit more defensively and just trying to hit them on the break.
Absolutely.
But get your super chats in, guys. Get your super chats in. We're going to be reading what all of you have to say. We are waiting on the team news, of course. It will be dropping at about 1 p.m. But Erik ten Hag, let me just get your thoughts.
I think it is 50 minutes early, isn't it?
Oh, is it? Oh, brilliant, even better. Let me get your thoughts on Erik ten Hag, Usman. I know you've been very vocal recently about his tenure at Manchester United. At what point was it you decided I've seen enough with Erik ten Hag?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a Champions League run. I mean, I think a lot of United fans would essentially contribute our absence from the Champions League last season to Onana's mistakes, and I completely understand that. But for me, I just seen his stubbornness at that point, and I felt like if he's going to be that stubborn with a goalkeeper that quite clearly needs to be dropped, it's not the right, and obviously it's not the right fit for us. And plus, he finished last. But to come back to today, as I just mentioned there, this is where he needs to drop his stubbornness. We've seen potentially Maguire and Evans are starting, and that's a good sign in the sense that, as you mentioned, he's rolling the dice. That might be his last opportunity. But I kind of applaud him for making that big call, and I actually respect him a lot more for doing the right thing, because let's be honest, they were nowhere near good enough against Porto, and both of them do not deserve to be starting. I'm a bit surprised that Lindelof maybe not got a shout, but look, I'm all for Evans starting. He tends to do well in United shirt regardless of his age. But for me, like I said, it comes down to that stubbornness. Is he going to rectify the wrongs? He's made that big call now. Now we need to set them up in the manner in which we can actually get a result here. Because look, for all Aston Villa's brilliance, we beat them last season 3-2 as well when they were 2-0 up. So we can definitely beat them. We beat them under Eric Ten Hag from worse.
We beat them home and away last year.
Yeah, exactly. Off a worse situation when we're 2-0 down, we came back from that and showed great resilience. For me, he has to take the positives from that game last season and implement them today. Yeah, they beat Bayern Munich, good for them, but I don't really care what they've done going into this game. We know Aston Villa are a great team regardless. We got to do what we got to do in terms of getting the 3 points today, and I really hope he sets us in a low block and hits them on the counter.
Yeah, and I know one more call you're going to be open Eric Ten Hag, mates, Bruno Fernandez.
Yeah.
And it's not just you. There's a lot of people who are going to be open that, off the back of 2 red cards. I know the red card against Tottenham Hotspur it probably wasn't a red card, and we got it rescinded eventually. But there's going to be a lot of people off the back of Bruno Fernandez's performance this year. They want to see Bruno dropped. Do you think we'll see it? No,
absolutely not. I mean, look, he's his captain, so I understand it from that perspective. But I've applauded him for dropping the 2 centre-backs that are his own. They're literally his players. I'm surprised he's done that. It's a fair play. But it's absolutely baffling that Bruno Fernandes has not been dropped this season, regardless of the performance against Porto or the performances against it. To get a red card against Porto off the back of getting a red card, yeah, as we mentioned, it was rescinded. So technically, maybe it wasn't a red card. But, after that game, I'm thinking he's going to come against Porto with a chip on his shoulder and say, oh, I owe this to the Manchester United fans. I've let us down, which he admitted to against Tottenham. And he's really going to put in a top quality performance, because that's what I expected from him as the captain, leading by example. And it was a polar opposite. If anything, he went into his shell, and he was he was a former player himself, essentially. That's not the right wording, but you know what I mean. It was really sad to see, if I'm being honest. I don't want to see our players in that situation where they completely avoid the confidence, and Bruno isn't someone like that. But yeah, for me personally, it's really baffling that Eriksen isn't playing in that 10. I know he's probably going to go with Mainu, Eriksen and Bruno. For me, that's a mistake. I'd probably go Gatti, Casemiro and Eriksen just for the pure screening, just soak up the pressure and hope hit him on the counter. But yeah, like you said, that's not going to happen realistically speaking. It should though, but it won't.
Yeah, I said a lot of people asking where Beth is. Beth is ill. She's caught something while she was on the trip to Portugal midweek, so that's why I am covering. Kev will be here later for anybody wondering, and we'll also have mods on the forum. We've actually got Mark. Mark's actually popped into the chat saying, Mark here, I've backed this guy, but that's sacking yourself. He's let everyone down who's got behind his vision. What do you think about that? Because I think it's actually the right call to put Maguire and Evans in there. On the back of the performance of Lisandro Martinez and De Ligt midweek, there's no excuse for that. Being 2 goals down, I know the whole team pretty much capitulated, and obviously Bruno got sent off, but being 2 goals down, and then within half hour of playing time, we're losing 3-2. The centre-back should have done miles better. I mean, Lisandro was just having a stinker all over the pitch, and De Ligt was extremely poor for the 3rd goal.
Agreed.
But you know what? I said this to you off camera, it really reminds me of Jose at the end of his tenure. I remember Mourinho going to Southampton away, and there was another game, I can't remember which one it was, but Southampton away in particular. And I think we played a back 5, and I think Scott McTominay played centre-back, and it was just one of the maddest lineups you've ever seen in your life. And it kind of, I don't think it's as extreme as that. We're not playing Scott McTominay at centre-back. We don't even employ Scott McTominay anymore. But you know what I mean? It kind of feels like he's come to the end. He kind of feels like he's realised, you know, what have I got left to do here?
Yeah, I mean, I understand where Mark's coming from and other fans that, you know, may have that same opinion. And I saw Mark's tweets, and to be fair, I completely get that. But the way I'm seeing it is, you know, he's basing it on the fact that they were just not good enough. I mean, I understand you got to stick to your guns, you got to stick to your principles, but the truth of the matter is he hasn't stuck to his principles for the best part of 2 years. I mean, we signed Onana, we got rid of, for me, one of our greatest goalkeepers of all time in David De Gea, for Onana. I mean, I bought into that from the start when he said, we're going to get rid of De Gea mainly because we want to play a different brand of football. And I was like, no, what, fair play. You know, that's a massive call. But if he actually allows us to play out from the back and we start to, you know, start attacks week in, week out, then he's justified in that decision. But he wasn't never justified in that decision because we haven't improved with Onana from what De Gea was producing. I mean, we're not particularly great in terms of defensively. We're not great off the line. We're not particularly good at starting attacks. So I just don't understand, you know, why he didn't stick to his principles. Onana kicks it as much as De Gea did. So for me, I think he gave up on his principles a long time. I don't think today is, oh, this is, you know, the final straw. He's completely gone back to basics, so forth. I think he sold his soul from that perspective a long time ago, which is what I'm trying to allude to. So yeah, today doesn't really make me feel that way. Like I said, at the end of the day, it's a good message to send to the players, regardless of who you are. If you're not good enough, you're not starting. So I respect it, but he has to live and die by that decision now. So hopefully from our perspective, it's the right call.
Yeah. Another focal point for Manchester United today, which has been a big issue so far this season, the attackers. Yeah. Now, we don't know which front three, or even if it's going to be a front three today, what we're going to set up with. It might be a completely different formation. But I've got some pretty damning stats here for you, which I saw on the way here. It's just comparing Watkins and Duran, so just two of Villa's attackers,
right, okay.
Just two of them. And one of them's on the bench all the time anyway, exactly, yeah. To all of United's attackers. So between Watkins and Duran, I feel like Rick here. I feel like Rick coming with me numbers.
He's going to be proud he's sat in Benidorm watching us right now. Shout out to you, Ricky.
So between Watkins and Duran, 8 goals this season in the Premier League. That's just in the Premier League. Manchester United, in total, not just the attackers, the entire team got 5 goals. Yeah. From Watkins and Duran's 8 goals, 5 expected goals, or 5.56 expected goals to be exact. Out of Manchester United's 5 goals, 10.55 expected goals.
Yeah, it's not good.
That is shockingly bad. I've got another one for you. Watkins and Duran, those 8 goals have had 24 shots between them. For United's 5 goals, 79 shots.
Bloody hell. That is quite damning, to say the least.
That is shockingly bad. That means Manchester United have a shot conversion of 6%, whereas Watkins and Duran together have a shot conversion of 33%, which... That's extremely clinical.
Yeah, that anything
above 20% for a striker is ridiculous.
I feel like clinical. A lot of that is Duran, to be fair. I mean, he's averaging a goal every 25 minutes, as you mentioned, doesn't start. But to come back to Manchester United from those stats, I think for me, it comes down to the lack of experience. I mean, if you look at our front line, and this is something I've said consistently, they're all very young. I mean, Garnacho's extremely young. I know it's his second actual season. He's had that breakthrough season. Ahmad is extremely young. You can make a case that this is Ahmad's first breakthrough season. Obviously, we've got Xerxes and Højlund, who aren't really proven strikers in terms of what they've done prior to their, joining of Manchester United. And of course, then you've got Anthony, that I completely forget that he's a player. Of course, Rashford is the only real senior bagsman. So for me personally, it comes down to a lack of experience. So I'm not going to be overly critical from that perspective because there's a lot of them are still learning their game. And to be honest, Rashford should have got a fair few more assists, in particular to Xerxes, who missed quite a few chances, that quite clear chances. So from that perspective, I'm happy to see Højlund back because I do actually think he's our best finisher, maybe bar Rashford, in the team, which doesn't really say a lot about the team, to be honest, because I don't think any of them are phenomenal talents from that perspective. So yeah, look, at the end of the day, it's not great reading. It's never going to be great reading. As Manchester United, you expect it to be scoring goals. The fact that I've got a season ticket and I've only seen 1 goal at Old Trafford this season in the Premier League
is mental,
extremely upsetting, and it rains every single time. So
that is mental.
And we still turn up every single week, but unfortunately the players don't. But yeah, look, I was really hoping off the back of that Barnsley game where we start padding, everyone essentially got GA that game, that we could build on that, but that hasn't been the case. So for me, We just need a bit of a confidence booster. So I'm hoping against Aston Villa we do take our chance, because I do think they're going to be far and few between, because they are a good team, as we've already mentioned. So we're going to have to be on job. But I do think, although those stats are very damning, we can change those fortunes in a couple of games.
I agree with you, mate. I think if they can go there and get 3 points today, which it's a massive task. It's a huge task to go there and try and get 3 points today, but you know, if they could pull a performance out and they can dig the reels in and walk away with a 1-0 or a 2-1, you know, that's the kind of win that'll give you a momentum shift. Definitely. Or you'd hope so anyway. Obviously, the big games we have played this season, we've not performed. Spurs and Liverpool, the ones I'm thinking of. I mean, Spurs was just utter capitulation, and then Liverpool, just to get beat by Liverpool at home without scoring a goal. I mean, you know, not ideal. Yeah, it's definitely not ideal. I have just seen a super chat. Syra Bar says, if you know this is your last dance, do you really want your last impression to be this lineup? Try to go down sword in hand. I agree with what you're saying, mate, but if you listen to the way Ten Hag's been speaking in these interviews, he doesn't really sound like a man who thinks he's going to be sacked. Realistically, I mean, I know you're never going to come out and admit that your job's on the line, or you know you've had the talk, but you know the way he talks, he seems to think, you know, we've got a long-term project. That's what keeps getting said, long-term project, and we're even hearing that, you know, from Ineos' point of view, they don't want to sack a manager off the back of, you know, they don't want to approach it in terms of, well, if we lose these 2 games, he's gone. You know, they want to approach it with a long-term vision, and obviously results are going to come into this. And, you know, I said 3 weeks ago, before we even played Spurs, when our next 3 games were Spurs, Porto and Villa, I said, if you really look at it, you could be coming away with, I don't think we'd beat Porto, to be honest. I know we didn't. I know we'd come away with a point, which in the bigger picture probably is a pretty decent point.
It's not bad, yeah.
But in the Premier League, which we all said this season he's going to be based off, he's going to be judged off the Premier League. You know, he's won his trophies, which we're obviously grateful for, because, you know, we hadn't won the FA Cup in 8 years.
Yeah.
So we're obviously grateful to win the trophies, but we all said 8th place finish for Manchester United, worst ever Premier League finish, worse than David Moyes' finish. And just remember the outrage of David Moyes. We need serious improvement. If we lose today, it's 7 points out of the first 21 points, which is just like, for Manchester United, it's almost uncomprehendable.
I mean, look, it wasn't even comprehensible for Valencia. We've got to remember that his record is genuinely worse than what Gary Neville's was at Valencia, and we know how that one ended. So the way I see it, it's a non-negotiable. He has to win today to save his job. I know it's really ridiculous to potentially put that much pressure on one game, but it's not so much the one game, it's the overarching picture, which, as you rightfully said, is 7 points out of 7 games. I mean, with what, 3-4 points of relegation if we lose today, we're currently on a -3 goal difference. I would imagine they're going to score a couple. So for me, it's a do or die, and if he wants to, you know, rest his potential United career on Maguire and Evans, so be it. But he has to do the right thing and set us up properly. So, look, fair play to him. He's rolled the dice, as you mentioned, but it's now, you know, the time for results. I mean, there's no time for excuses. Last season, everyone was making excuses for him, saying there's too many injuries, there's not enough structure, he hasn't got his players. This team is his team. I don't think anyone can dispute that. Yes, the players that are playing today aren't necessarily the ones that he signed, but he is choosing to play them over his own players. That is completely on the manager. Nobody's got a gun to his head and saying you have to play these players. That's on him. At the end of the day, he picks a team. The buck stops with the manager, not on Ineos or anybody else. He decides the team. He decides the setup. So he has to deliver. This is Manchester United Football Club. I've seen a lot of fans, you know, making excuses and saying, "Oh, look at what happened with Sir Alex Ferguson." With all due respect, Sir Alex Ferguson is just a freak in terms of he's an anomaly. Not many Sir Alex Ferguson exist. It's like comparing players to Ronaldo and Messi. It's just, you're setting them up to fail. Like, you can't compare with the GOATs of the sport. So for me, yes, there are parallels that you can draw between Sir Alex Ferguson's early tenure and that of Eric Ten Hag, but with all due respect, you know, it's not the same period of time. And secondly, it's like, it's a completely different ballgame. Sir Alex Ferguson did not spend 600 million. Sir Alex Ferguson didn't have all his players in his third season and so forth. There's just so many different, you know, facets, and I just don't think it's as easy to compare him. So for me, he has to deliver. We have to get 3 points. Like you mentioned, we didn't lose to him last season. He already has the beating of Emery Emre. He's got no excuses. So, just set your team up the way you feel like it's going to get us the points and just get it done. I don't care about how we get it done. Let's just get the points, get out there and get to the international break.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't care for the performance today. All I care for is the 3 points. If we come away with 3 points today with 10% possession, I'll be happy.
Absolutely.
I'll be absolutely buzzing, mate. We've got a super chat here from Eric, who said, we've had open heart surgery, but by incompetent surgeons, which leads into a point which we've kind of touched on it, but I'm going to link it back to the Porto game. So, obviously today, he's dropped his 2 guys. Like we said, over 100 million quid spent on Matthijs de Ligt and Lisandro Martinez. For him to drop them on such a high pressure, important game for him, you could argue one of his biggest games as Manchester United manager, and he's dropped his guys. There were similar shouts when we played Porto midweek of, Ugarte not getting a start. Why is Ugarte not getting a start? We just spent 50 million quid on him. What have we actually spent 50 million quid on if we're not even going to start him?
Yeah.
If United were to get a win today and put in a decent performance with Maguire and Evans at the back, where does that leave Ten Hag in terms of team selection after the international break? Because then is he going to have to pick Maguire and Evans now because, he's give these guys the chance and they've basically saved him. So is he forced then to go with those guys? But then he's got 100 million quid sat on the bench.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of made a rod for his own back with that in a sense. Obviously, like you said, if it works, then he puts him in a really awkward situation after the international break. But as they always say, it's a good headache to have for a manager. You'd rather have that headache than the other headache. But look, just to come back to what we've already said, pick your players on merit. If he feels that Maguire warrants a start over Martinez and obviously Evans over De Ligt, then fair enough. But the way I see it is, the one thing you can always guarantee with Maguire is there's always a mistake around the corner. And again, people will say, well, De Ligt and Martinez aren't covering themselves in glory, but where's the long-term, as Mark was upset about, where's the long-term vision? Like, it's not sustainable to play Maguire and Evans. Okay, for a one-off game it might work, maybe 2 games in a row it might work, but long-term vision, Martinez and De Ligt are your centre-backs, and you've essentially cast them away. So from that perspective, it is interesting. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, he had faith in Ronaldo even during that Champions League run, where for me, he should have got dropped after the second game. So it's interesting how he's changed his sort of stance on certain things. Maybe that's a lesson he's learned. So for that, fair enough. But yeah, look, the way I see it is, let's just get through today. And then let's see what happens after the international break. But for now, I just hope for our sake that they don't score in the first 20 minutes, because it could be a very, very long day, especially if we're chasing the game and Watkins has space to run in behind. It's not going to be pretty. Yeah,
I agree with what you're saying about Maguire. Johnny Evans, I'm actually a big Johnny Evans fan.
Same.
And I always compare him to Harry Maguire because I think it's, it's probably they're basically, they seem like they're online in the pecking order, but I've always said with Johnny Evans, you'll get a stable 6 out of 10 performance, and you'll never see one of these massive cock-ups that Maguire's just prone to. I mean, like Maguire, even though you can get a run of performances out of Maguire sometimes, you just know there's always a mistake in there, like you said. I've got a super chat here from Darren, and then we have got the team news. Let me read Darren's super chat, guys, and then we'll get into the team news. Darren says, hi, guys. I think we need a strong-minded manager like Ferguson. Who do you both want as next manager? Well, in an ideal world, Darren, I'd love Erik ten Hag to turn it around. I would love nothing more than Erik ten Hag to turn it around and get us winning. But I just think he's got no chance. I think it's gone too far now. I think the hole's been dug too deep for him to claw this back.
So who's the name you're giving?
I think, and I know a lot of people are against the idea, but I think beggars can't be choosers, man. And I think Thomas Tuchel has the best CV for it, personally. I know people are saying, but he was only at Chelsea for 2-3 years before he got sacked. But come on, man, the guy's a Champions League winner. Who are we to turn down a Champions League winning manager? And it's not like it's Mourinho. We won the Champions League 20 years ago. The guy won the Champions League 3-4 years ago. So that'd be the first one I'd look at. I think is it Inzaghi people are talking about.
Not Inzaghi, I don't want Inzaghi. I to be honest, let's get the team news on, then I'll give my thoughts if it's out now.
Yeah, so here we go, people. Manchester United's lineup today. We've got Andre Onana in net, Mazraoui at right back, Harry Maguire, Evans, Diallo, Fernandez.
Okay.
Bruno Fernandez is starting, Eriksen, Mainu, which Mainu was actually a doubt. I wasn't actually expecting Mainu to start, but Mainu's there. Alejandro Garnacho, Marcus Rashford, and Rasmus Højlund. So in terms of a front three, he's gone with his most trusted front three, the guys who plays the most.
So no Ahmad Diallo again.
No Ahmad Diallo. Ahmad is on the bench. Let's go through the bench dead quick. So you've got De Ligt on the bench, you've got Martinez on the bench, you've got Lindelof on the bench again. Casemiro, Ugarte again, that's interesting, we'll talk about that. Ahmad, Anthony and Xerxes. Let us know what you think with a super chat, guys, about that lineup. But one thing I just want to point out here, Manchester United's bench on such a high pressure game, you've got De Ligt on the bench, what's that, 40 million quid. You've got Martinez on the bench, 60 million quid. You've got Ugarte on the bench, 50 million quid.
Casemiro 60.
Casemiro 60. So you've got
over 200 million.
You've got over 200.
Anthony's 85, 285.
You've got
Jesus Christ. Xerxes was 30, 32.
You've got over
300 million.
300 million pounds of Erik ten Hag signings on the bench.
Wow, that's mental.
Wow.
When you put it like that, I mean, it's humongous call. I just think for me, there's two things that I just don't understand. The midfield for me has been getting run through for the entirety of Erik ten Hag's tenure. So what has he done? He's put Eriksen and Mainu again. I mean, I feel sorry for Mainu. He's just getting hung out to dry week in, week out. He's a top quality player, but he's just not got the midfield around him to support him. I just don't understand how you can sign Ugarte. And there's a lot of murmurs to suggest Ugarte wasn't ten Hag signing, regardless of whether it's your signing or not. You know, you've got him and Casemiro, both DMs, on the bench. You've not got DM on the pitch, where notoriously our midfield's not good. So it's a massive mistake in my personal opinion. And then you come to Ahmad Diallo, just laughable at this point. I mean, the fact that Ahmad Diallo look, he didn't cover himself in glory against Paul, I'm not going to lie. You know, I don't think he was brilliant. But to drop him, I just think it's ridiculous. He's our most talented player. The only reason Ahmad didn't do much against Paul is because Rashford was absolutely fantastic. They kept giving the ball to him, which is fine. Because he was obviously beating his man without any sort of issues. So I understand it from that perspective. But yeah, you need quality on the pitch, and I just don't think we have enough.
I'll tell you who I do worry for today, and it was a point I brought up earlier in the start of the season. I worry for Kobbie Mainoo. Because, you know, a lot of people have said Mainoo's had a poor start to the season, but I think he's been absolutely hung out to dry by likes of Bruno Fernandez, not holding a midfield shape. And I know I'm going back to the Liverpool game where it was Casemiro, Mainoo and Fernandez, and you've got Fernandez running all over the place. I know Casemiro's not playing today, but, you know, his legs are gone. I want to say Eriksen's, you know, an engine in particular. I think Kobbie Mainoo could be at risk of just getting absolutely ran all over today. And it's not his fault. It's not his fault because he's Manchester United's best midfielder, in my opinion. But he can't do it by himself. Nobody can do it by themselves. Yeah,
that midfield, as you mentioned, it needs to have extreme discipline. Bruno Fernandez, I'm going to be looking at Bruno Fernandez today. I know a lot of United fans are big Bruno Fernandez fans, and I understand why. But the way I see it is, he's your captain. He needs to dig us out of a hole. You know, 2 games in a row, he's got a red card, whatever you want to say against the Tottenham one. It's a red card, whatever. And he didn't do it against Paul. And today we need him badly to step up. He hasn't stepped up all season. He's not had a good game all season, realistically speaking, in my humble opinion. So these are the games where you need your big players to really deliver, and he hasn't done enough of that, especially when we really need him away from home against a good opposition. You know, these are the games that you're judged on, and our backs are against the wall. As we mentioned, we have to win. The manager's job is on the line. Let's see what your captain does. And he has to be disciplined off the ball. As you mentioned, he consistently runs out of position and he leaves Eriksen and Mainoo exposed time and time again. So I want to see Bruno Fernandes disciplined on the ball and off the ball. Stay in your position, stay in your shape, stay compact and play to the plan. I'm assuming we're going to play a low block and counter attack. I'd be extremely surprised if we, try a different approach. Because that is setting ourselves up to fail in this given moment in time. Yes, it's not what we wanted from Erik ten Hag, but today is a needs-must game. Get the 3 points. I don't care how we play, like you said. And yeah, I'm intrigued to see how Bruno does. Yeah, we've got a load of super chats here, but we'll read them all out and we'll delve into it. Trey Warren says he's either drinking or said 17 million quid sounds great. And do you know what? Could be both, mate. It could be both. Hey, listen, it's not a bad payoff, mate. I can tell you won't be upset, mate. 17 million straight to the account. You love to see it.
United One says, nailed it, Usman. He has players he wanted and now structure. United are as big as a club as Real Madrid, especially revenue and branding-wise. So sack until you find the right manager. We've got more super chats. Let me just get them up. Philip McGee says, Rafa won a Champions League. Should we get him? I know that's aimed at me, Rafa, but I think you probably
That's not what you meant.
probably typed your super chat out a little bit too early, because right after I said it, I followed it up with, he didn't win the Champions League 20 years ago. He won it 3-4 years ago, mate. You know, when did Rafa win the Champions League? 2005?
You did use the jersey as an example of someone who's won the Champions League. A dinosaur, essentially.
Yeah, dinosaurs are good.
But thank you for the super chat.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Abdurrahman says, the most important question is, what if we win after displaying a good game? Would that change your mind on Erik ten Hag, even after his starting choice? We kind of touched on that before in terms of Maguire and Evans, you know, what does he go forward with?
Look, for me, obviously, I know the United Stand fans, they hate when I'm negative, but I just got to keep it 100. In my personal opinion, I don't think one game sways anything. Look, I respect him for making the big calls, as I've mentioned, but at the end of the day, we'll still be, 12th probably? I haven't checked exactly where we go. Yes, people can say it's so early in the season, can turn it around. I understand that, but I've seen this story before. I mean, we've had wins under Jose and Ole Gunnar Solskjaer when our backs against the wall. I remember that famous one under Jose when we beat Newcastle, where everyone in the dog thought he was getting sacked. That weekend we somehow beat them.
I was at that game.
I think it was Pogba and Martial that pulled him out.
Pogba, Martial, and Alexis Sanchez.
Yeah, exactly. So and then inevitably he got sacked like 2 weeks later down the line. So the way I personally see it, it's just delaying the inevitable. If you win today and he doesn't get sacked, and he'll probably eventually get sacked in a couple of weeks anyway. So that's just my opinion. If you disagree, that's completely fine. But yeah, I just don't see things changing, unfortunately.
Yeah, super chat from Big Z says, Fred had tenacity and energy that we now lack. Made critical blocks and interceptions, key to some of our best performances, i.e. versus Barcelona under Erik ten Hag. Well, it's interesting with Fred, mate, because we're going to get a good look at Fred next week. Oh, not next week, sorry, the week after the international break.
That's a long day.
In the Europa League, yeah, so that could get messy. And Amrabat as well. Jimmy Kudo says, Maguire, Evans, no number 6. You could dock the Titanic in that midfield. This is what I mean, mate. It could get messy. I feel bad.
This is the all-timer hung out to drive for Kobbie Mainoo.
Mate, I feel terrible.
He's got Maguire and Evans behind him. He's got Eriksen next to him. He's got Maguire, Evans, and Eriksen next to him. That's a combined age of like 95.
Yeah, I mean, it literally, it's the point I made back in after we played Liverpool.
And Bruno 30 is what? So if you, they're all.
And Bruno's going to be
the average age is
anyway,
average age is like 32. It's insane.
I really do worry for Mainoo though, because you just know where you know, some people pin the blame on him. You know, there was people pinning the blame on him when you know, he played poorly against Liverpool, but I think you could look deeper into it and say, well, you know, he had McAllister and Gravenberch running rings round him because he's trying to hold it up by himself. And at the end of the day, he's 19 years old. Like, regardless of how good he is, I truly believe he's Manchester United's best midfielder. I'd probably even go as far as saying Manchester United's best player. I genuinely rate Kobbie Mainoo that highly. But you've got to help him out. You can't just put him in there by himself with
midfield, like any position on the pitch, like for example the centre back's all about partnerships. Midfield is all about balance. I mean, that midfield screams zero balance for me. Yes, you can make a case that on the ball Eriksen and Bruno definitely help us, but what we're doing off the ball, I don't think we're going to have a lot of the ball today. So that's why I'm really surprised about that selection. I genuinely thought he'd look to park the bus, as it not necessarily park the bus, but play players that, you know, give you the ability to screen the back line. So it's really interesting to see. I'm assuming he's going to try to set us up to, you know, play with possession. So we'll have to wait and see. I personally think that's a massive mistake. As the gentleman said, you can literally park the Titanic in that midfield. It's crazy.
Joe, let me have a quick little look at Aston Villa's lineup, because the headline is seen is that Duran is on the bench again. I know some people were probably thinking he's going to start after he got his goal against Bayern Munich, but no, they've set up pretty much the exact same. They've gone with Martinez in net, Matty Cash, Konza, Pau Torres, Luca Dean, I don't even know how you pronounce his name, Philogene.
I'm not even familiar.
Ross Barkley, Yuri Tielemans, Leon Bailey, Rodgers and Watkins. I mean, it's scary when I seen Mark actually on his podcast say no Manchester United players right now would get into the Aston Villa squad. And it's probably true. True.
I just want to point out one thing, right? I don't know if our fans have noticed this as well, but we seem to concede quite a few shots at the edge of the D. And you just mentioned Tielemans and Ross Barkley are both notoriously good from scoring outside the box. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if a score from a cutback, edge of the box, Ross Barkley or Tielemans running onto it. So that is definitely something I'm worried about. I know everyone's going to be focused on Bailey and obviously Watkins with their pacing behind, and just Bailey in particular, this quality on the ball, but we don't have a natural DM. Like, if you think about it logically, a natural DM sniffs out the danger. They're going to be looking at that cutback where, you know, Ross Barkley or Tielemans could running onto it. Mainu's not really going to be looking at that. Eriksen's not going to be quick enough to cover the ground to get to block that Barkley or Tielemans shot. I actually think it's going to be one of them two that probably opens the scoring. So, yeah, I'm extremely worried. Where's Rodgers? Did you say Rodgers? Sorry.
Yeah, Rodgers is in there.
Oh, he's in the left.
Yeah, let me just double check for you, but I'm pretty sure Rodgers was in the. Yeah, Rodgers is in there.
So he's probably left wing then. So again, Rodgers, a great ball carrier. Oh, Lord have mercy. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I just don't understand how he's not gone for 2 DMs. I would have just literally said, look, lads, don't even move from here. Sit in front of Maguire and Evans, and we're going to play prime Stoke football FC. So, you know, just keep it nice and tight, nice and compact. And it looks like he's going to try and play, you know, possession-based football with Bruno and Eriksen. And I think they're going to lap that up and run rings around us. So, yeah, we'll have to wait and see. First 15 minutes, big. We got to weather that storm.
Yeah, I've got a super chat here from Connor who says, convinced this guy wants the sack. How has Ahmad not earned the right to start? Well, what do you think about that, actually? Because I know you said against Porto you wasn't overly impressed with Ahmad, but
I wasn't, no.
In the overall picture of the Premier League this season, I've been impressed with Ahmad.
No, I have.
Yeah, and, you know, an interesting point from midweek game in Porto was wingers and the will to get back and defend. You know, we seen Marcus Rashford get hooked off at half-time where, you know, a quote from Ten Hag basically confirmed that, you know, he got hooked off because he wasn't doing his defensive work. He mentioned that we were getting battered down the right-hand side and he wanted Garnacho on the pitch, which put 2 and 2 together. We know what's going on there. Something that you do get from Ahmad is his defensive work. So it's interesting that, you know, in such a critical game to win, where we're going to be under the cosh, he's gone with Rashford, who got hooked off for not doing his defensive work, and then probably not started his best defensive wing in terms of doing his work, getting back. Ahmad's probably the best at it. I know, to be fair, I think Anthony's actually pretty good at it, but Anthony's never going to get a start, mate. But Ahmad's probably the best out of Garnacho, Rashford and Ahmad. Ahmad probably does his defensive work the best, so it's interesting that he's dropped him, you know, after making such a big deal about it midweek. Yeah,
I think it's definitely going to be interesting to see how Rashford fares and how he sort of, you know, reacts to that. Is he going to track back a lot? Because Diallo will most definitely need him. My biggest concern is as follows. I think, you know, let's just say hypothetically Rashford plays in a similar manner in terms of like his lack of defensive duties. We're going to get that pocket of space where, you know, they're going to be doubling up with the winger and the fullback. It's going to really give Tielemans or Barkley an extra couple of yards of space, because obviously Mainu's going to have to come over to cover because Rashford's not going to be there. And that basically allows Barkley and Tielemans to get into that space where it's going to be, you know, eventually evacuated, or so to speak, because Mainu's not going to be there. And look, they've both got quality on the ball. With a couple of yards of space, they're going to cause us a lot of problems. I genuinely think that their midfield is going to be our biggest issue, like in terms of how we're going to combat their midfield. And I feel like if Rashford isn't tracking back, it sets us up to fail personally. But just to come back to Ahmad Diallo, look, for me, I wouldn't have been upset if you put Garnacho on the left and Ahmad on the right. I would not be mad about that, because Garnacho defensively is definitely better than Rashford. I think we'd all agree on that. But the Ahmad situation is really baffling, because you need your players with the most quality on the pitch. I mean, if he's going to play Eriksen, Bruno, that suggests to me he wants to keep the ball, which is fair enough. But then why would you not play Ahmad Diallo, who's our best winger at keeping the ball? He's technically sound. He's great in the small pockets of space. And on the counter-attack, yes, he's gone for pace. On paper, that sounds like a better decision. But you need your winger to make the right decision at the right times. And for me, I've said time and time again, if it's between Rashford, Garnacho and Ahmad in a position where they need to make the right decision, out of the three, I'm picking Ahmad every single time. I think he's got the highest IQ out of the three of them, and on the counter-attack where we need someone to pick the pass, I think he's the most likely to be successful in doing that. So it is a disappointing mistake. He did it against Spurs and he did it against Liverpool, that both ended up in 3-0. As we've said before, I'm not saying if Ahmad started, we would have won those games, but you know...
But you meant to play your best players.
Yeah, exactly. So like, as I said before, Arsenal would not drop Saka for somebody who's faster than him. And I know Ahmad's not on Saka's level, but the point being is play your best players, as you've just said. So it is a bit of a surprise.
Yeah, I am just going to go back, guys, and get your super chats that I have missed, because I know there was 3 or 4 of them. So just bear with me here.
But yeah, whilst he's doing that, obviously just keep getting your comments in. Let us know in the chat. Obviously, let us know your thoughts if you disagree or agree with what we're saying. I know a lot of the stuff that myself and Tull say isn't the most popular things, but the truth of the matter is, you know, it's not a great position for Manchester United. We're currently sat in 14th. We want to be, you know, pushing for those top spots. You know, we know it's a process, it's going to take a long time, but at the same time, we need to see results. It's a results business, so it's a big game. Big calls are made. Tull, why are you looking for them? Obviously,
I've got them up now. I'm just going to get straight to it. So Universal Soldier says there are about 5 managers in the Prem that can win the Prem with that squad, not including Arne Slot and Pep Guardiola. I think that might be a bit extreme, but look, even though I think the manager could do better, I do still think that squad isn't. You know, I think Manchester United fans are very prone to overrating players.
I wouldn't say it's a title-winning team, mainly because of the lack of experience in the final third.
Top 4?
No, absolute top 4. I still think that if we set up properly with the right system, the right, you know, sort of instructions, nice and compact, and not, you know, be so easy to play against, we can definitely get results against Aston Villa.
Yep, Annie Rudd says, I don't ever want us to lose a match, but this lineup, I do not think there's a way back for Eric. I think it's time for a change. Well, we'll see, mate, because I remember me and Kev being on the build-up to the FA Cup final.
Yeah.
And the lineup before the FA Cup final looked a bit mental at first. I mean, Kev were going, you know, do we want to win today?
Yeah.
And we're going, what's going on? Are we actually playing to win today? And it ended up being one of our best performances under Eric Ten Hag. So you never know. You never know, mate.
But that's the thing. He set us up so perfectly. That
he set us up a bit more pragmatic.
That's what I'm saying. Like you've said already, we need to be more pragmatic. Look, just get the job done. Set us up, you know, so they can't play through us. I mean, Tielemans and Barkley in particular, they're top quality players, but at the end of the day, if you make it compact and force and wide, we've always got a chance to hurt them on the break. So that's going to be my biggest thing. How big of a gap are we going to leave in the middle of the park? Because if Tielemans sees a lot of the ball, he will score at the edge of the box. He's got that in his locker.
Yeah, United won also on that point of Ahmad Diallo. He says, not starting Ahmad shows this guy is clueless. I'd love to see a poll right now. I know Mark did one, but I'd love to see with my very own eyes, because we've got 15,000 people near enough in here. I would love to see what the split is of Eric Ten Hag in and Eric Ten Hag out right now. Because I know at the start of the season, it was a vast majority Eric Ten Hag in. I imagine that's changed a little bit now. So if we could get a poll, if that's possible, Mods, do you know how to do a poll from the... Yeah, Matt, perfect. Cheers, guys. Sean with a super chat here. Mazraoui needs to play left back instead of Diallo. Something I thought about the other day that actually never overlaps, incompetent on the ball, absolute liability. I assume that's Diallo you're talking about. I seen someone make an interesting point on Twitter midweek about, you know, Martinez being so exposed. It's probably coming from, you know, if you actually look as like an over-the-top view of Manchester United on the ball, Diallo's been playing almost like a midfielder.
Yeah,
it's like we're trying to do a weird...
He's inverted.
It's like we're trying to do a weird, like, Pep-inspired tactic.
I think he has to.
And it's just not working at all.
Yeah, I think he kind of has to, because obviously he's not left-footed. So I know he can use his left foot, but I don't feel like he's got a choice. Actually, to be fair, he did do that with Shaw as well. But for me, I definitely want my fullbacks overlapping. I do think, you know, within this sort of era of Pep ball, so to speak, a lot of managers starting to get inverted. And I personally prefer my fullback overlapping. I want my, you know, winger, most dangerous player in the space. So yeah, that's a massive issue. I do think Mazraoui needs to overlap a lot more and help his winger as well. So that's definitely something I would probably agree on to an extent.
I think a big part of it, and you always hear Ricky talking about it, but I think team shape's such a massive part of it. I want my fullbacks to be hugging the sideline. I want my wingers to be hugging the sideline. So I'm such a big fan of Ahmad Diallo, because he always holds his right wing spot, whereas Rashford and Garnacho are almost like they're almost like strikers, the way they, you know, they just want to be in the box, whereas Ahmad actually holds his shape, and I think the team as a whole benefits from having, you know, you always know your winger's there, you can always go wide to your winger, and then if you've got fullbacks overlapping, then, you know, I think we saw the best Marcus Rashford when Luke Shaw was playing, because, you know, Luke Shaw would always overlap him and get him, and, you know, and help him out. A point about Marcus Rashford from AVI here says, that midfield is too slow, but also Diallo will get no help again from Rashford. It's not looking good.
I mean, if he doesn't get any help against Leon, is Leon Bailey that plays on side? He's going to get cooked. I mean, he got cooked by Dibbling, who I rate actually, who's doing really well.
He looks quality,
Yeah, he does look good. But beside the point, he's going to get absolutely crucified if Rashford's not helping. I'd be really surprised if I'm not seeing Rashford tracking back after he's just been hooked for that very reason. I'm expecting to see a Marcus Rashford defensively and offensively. I mean, there was an interview with Saka that he did with Thierry Henry recently, and they were asking him about his defensive duties and, you know, how they were applauding him for his defensive work, and he basically replied saying, I'm happy you've noticed that we put in a lot of work, and although, you know, we don't want to be in these areas, we have to do it for the team, and that's the mentality that our players need to have if we're going to actually have any success. So yeah, that's a big part of how today's going to go. Yeah,
it's a team game. It's a team game. Paul's from Sports Clips with a massive super chat. Cheers very much, mate. That midfield is so weak. I get my dream tomorrow when he's gone. Monday morning tomorrow, it's, you know, we do see it a lot. Monday, 9 a.m. You see the brief that manager's been sacked. In an ideal world, mate, like I said, I'd much rather Manchester United win today, put 3 points on the board, and us not have to write off another season. But big pressure on Ten Hag. Like we've said it multiple times today. Paul Connolly saying, "Come on, Eric Ten Hag." Obviously, there are still people backing Eric Ten Hag. Let's see in the poll here. So we've got 2,000 votes so far. If you look in the chat, guys, there is a poll for Eric Ten Hag in or out. I'm going to have a look where it's sat right now. It's pretty close. It's slightly more out, but it is pretty close. It's near enough 50-50. I'd love to hear what you guys think, if you guys want to back up your point, whether you're Eric Ten Hag in. You know, I'm hearing a lot of Eric Ten Hag out in the chat, but let's see, is there any Eric Ten Hag inners in here? I want to hear from some Eric Ten Hag inners. Send us some super chats. I'm just saying, Avi sent another super chat. Let me just get that up.
It'd be interesting to see like what the reasoning is, why people are still backing the manager. I know. Oh, wait, go on.
Oh, I've got that one. Midfield's too slow. Diallo will get no help. We've covered that one, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to hear from you guys, obviously, why you're still backing the manager, why you're Eric Ten Hag out. Look, for me, I've made it very clear what my reasoning is. To come back to your initial thing where you said you wanted Thomas Tuchel, it's hard for me to say yes to that. The only reason being is because I know how pragmatic he is, but
it's not necessarily that I want Thomas Tuchel.
I was about to say, but as you said, beggars can't be choosers.
Yeah, so. Like I said, I'd much rather Ten Hag turn it around.
No, of course.
I'd much rather United win today and get the season, you know, get the ball moving. But I'm just saying,
what about Ruud van Nistelrooy? How would you feel about that?
No.
Because that does look, for me, as an outsider, obviously I've got no inside sources, but it looks like they set him up.
Yeah, no, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see him get set up the way Solskjaer got set up. It literally is just the same situation as Solskjaer.
Yeah.
You know, you know what these players are like? It's the same players
they'll not respect him. A lot of them
are the same players who stopped playing for Ole. You know, you probably get a little bounce. Everyone's been saying it. You'll get a little bounce. You know, we might go on 2 months where we win our games. Ruud will get given the job on a permanent again, and then these players will get comfortable and stop playing. How many times have we seen it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely understand. But yeah, get your comments in the chat. Obviously, let us know. Like for me, regarding the Ruud thing, he's just too inexperienced.
Yeah. We've got super chat here from Patrick. What's the deal with the defence? Are we going to play a low line and counter attack? Well, to be honest, mate, whatever we do, as long as it's different from what we have been doing, we set up against Liverpool and Spurs and we got battered, absolutely battered. I know we got a red card against Spurs. He's got to change something.
Yeah, definitely.
And I know it's an extreme change and I know he's dropped his guys, but he's on the verge of the sack. Something's got to change. It's like we said, it's one last roll of the dice. I've got another super chat here from Michael. As long as no Glazers out, manager change. As long as the Glazers are here, the manager change will not work. That's why you're Eric Ten Hag in. Well, I know what you mean. I know the Glazers are still there, but let's not act like Ineos have come in and hired a load of people, mate. Yeah. We are looking at a complete new setup here, and we've got to judge them as well, because I always think, I made a point in summer where I'm going to use Josh Zirkzee as an example here. I think Zirkzee's a great player. I've watched him at Old Trafford and I think his touch is awesome. I think he's got a good football IQ. But it's Josh Zirkzee what we needed. If you look at last season, our biggest issue in the league was we didn't score enough goals. You know, we finished 4 or 5 places below Aston Villa, and Aston Villa actually conceded like 15, 20 more goals than us last year, but they were just outscoring teams.
Yeah.
We needed a striker. Like, I really believe we needed a striker this season.
I completely
And I
agree.
don't get how Ineos, the new setup they put together, I don't get how they've not identified that by all you've got to do is look at the Premier League table of last season, look at goals for, and look how below we are. We're like bottom half of the table for goals scored. I don't get how they've not identified that as such a big issue.
Yeah, I mean, Ivan Toney was right there. I know a lot of people probably aren't a fan of his, but he's the kind of striker we need. He had that bit of arrogance about him, and obviously he's Premier League proven. So, you know, he's probably not one for the future, but I think we've got too many one for the future players in that team.
I agree. Like, I know we're trying to build something.
I respect it, but there's too many of them. The entire front lines are one for the futures, and we need it for the present. So, you know, it's all about finding that balance, and I just don't think they've done that. But to come back to his comment regarding the Glazers, look, everyone's Glazers are. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with you. However, I just don't see how we can look at the Glazers in this season and say, oh, it's because of the Glazers the manager's not successful. And I know people are going to get onto me, and let me explain myself before you do. At the end of the day, Ineos have backed Ten Hag this season. He may have not got all of his number one, you know, sort of players, but nonetheless, they've backed him. They've brought in the structure. We were all absolutely lauding how good the structure is. We were all absolutely lauding how quick we're making signings and X, Y, Z. Let's not now, because the results are going down south, that we just changed everything that we were saying not so many weeks ago. So for me, he's actually got no excuse. I don't think the Glazer excuse works for Ten Hag, because Ineos have done a good job on paper in terms of getting his players in, you know, providing him with funds. And as we mentioned, he's benched half of his squad, 300 million worth of his signings on the bench. That's on the manager.
Insane, isn't it?
That's not on the Glazers. That's 300 million worth of talent that he signed. It's on the bench.
We've got a super chat here from John, and then we've got some quotes from Eric Ten Hag, where I'm going to play a little game with these Eric Ten Hag quotes with you, which I think you'll enjoy. But John says, and John's getting cooked here in the chat, mate, because John says, I don't think we should sack him. He's made a lot of progress, especially against Crystal Palace. It's just going to take time. And there's a lot of replies cooking John for using the word progress. But do you know what? I'm going to give John a little bit of leeway, because at the start of the season, I mean, I know to a certain extent you've got to get results, but I did say at the start of the season, like, I do believe we're playing a bit better football. The Palace game in particular, I thought we played really well. I thought the first half against Brighton, we played really well. We can't put the ball in the back of the net. I mean, if you look at our expected goals, over 10 expected goals, double our goals of what we actually have scored, it could be a completely different story if we had just took our chances.
Look, I understand that, you know, conversation.
This is me playing devil's advocate here. I'm sat on the fence.
I know you well, don't worry. But the way I see that sort of whole conversation is very simple. Firstly, these are his players. So, he you know, at the end of the day, the buck always stops with the manager. He signed these players. You know, he's the one who's selecting these players and so forth. But to come back to the conversion rate, like, at the end of the day, you know, some of that may be inflated. There's context to be applied, but we haven't played good football for the entirety of his tenure. So it's very hard to just look at that Crystal Palace game as in a sort of isolation and say, oh, because of this Crystal Palace game, we're going to make progress. And the truth of the matter is, the games you mentioned there, the Brighton one in particular, second half, we were absolutely diabolical, firstly. And the second thing is, you know, we haven't been good for, you know, a long period of time. Like, you pick these one games to suggest progression, but you're progressing.
One win in the last 10.
Yeah, but you're progressing from what? You're progressing from what? That Brighton game might look like it was a decent game for an Eric Ten Hag team, but for a Pep Guardiola team, that's a disaster performance. Klopp team, poor performance. Arteta, Emery, they're poor performance for them team, because they've got high standards. Our standards are so low on the bar that half actually looks like progress, but in actual facts, that's the bare minimum. We're scraping the barrel here. So although it might look like progress, but you're progressing from 8th. So yeah, for me, it's just the bar so low as it is. So anything above the bar looks like progress.
Yeah, well, we've got a load of Eric Ten Hag quotes here, which we're going to get into before we move over to Mark's show. But just a quick little game I want to play with you, Usman.
Get your comments in.
The chat might have already seen the quotes, but Usman, what do you think the reason is Eric Ten Hag has given for picking Evans and Maguire today?
Squad rotation.
Usman, you'd be correct.
Yes.
Eric Ten Hag has said Today's choices of Evans and Maguire are based on squad rotation. He backs it up with, it's part of a process. We need a strong mentality and we have to improve and move forward.
Trust the process, trust the process.
He's also said every game is important, so don't make it too big. We are calm and composed. My players and I are very calm and focused purely on our own deficits and what we need to improve on. He's also said about Aston Villa. Aston Villa are a very good team. We've got the chat, a lot of laughing faces in the chat. Aston Villa are a very good team and it's a challenge. They beat Munich. They also have made some changes and we can see what they are looking for. Again, just a bit more on the De Ligt and Martinez situation, rotation. We have so many games to cover, so we have to bring them all in. Can I just say, aren't we going into international break here? Am I confused? I mean, like he brought Martinez and De Ligt off early, and now we're going into international break. Right, I don't get it, but
just on that statement, if he's basing on rotation, okay, let's just play, devil's advocate for a second. If he's basing on rotation, then why is Bruno Fernandez starting?
Yeah,
because Bruno is the one player
against Porto, didn't
starts constantly, regardless of how he plays. He of all players probably needs a rest. He's the only one that really doesn't get an opportunity to rest. So you had a perfect opportunity to put Eriksen there and probably an Ugarte or a Casemiro, and go Eriksen, Mainu, and Casemiro or Ugarte, whichever one he prefers. So it's just a cop-out, really, isn't it?
We've got a load of super chats here just before we move over to Mark. Kyle says, we are not playing better football. Every game we've played could have gone either way, except for Barnsley, even Southampton.
I completely agree with that.
Mr. Ferg says, we need a Spanish manager. Every club in the world doing well has Spanish managers. I mean, it's not completely true, but yeah, I suppose. That's the philosophy that wins. Ten Hag isn't built for the top level. I wonder if Mr. Ferg is Spanish. Hamza says, I agree that we are playing better football. I think a main reason we're not scoring is Bruno being out of form and Højlund not starting, obviously because he was injured.
Well, we'll see today, won't we?
Yeah. Xerxes looks really good and tidy, but he needs to find his feet with scoring goals. I agree with the last point about Xerxes. I really like Josh Xerxes. Yeah. It was the game against Twente. I know it finished 1-1. But I kept a close eye on Josh Xerxes because he was just amazing, me. Some under pressure. I know he wasn't against Spurs. He had a shocker against Spurs. I'll admit that. But under pressure, it looks like he can bring the ball down really well. It's just one of those, though, where if you're going to play someone up top for Manchester United, you can't make an exception for them not getting in the box and being a goal threat.
No, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
absolutely.
You've got to.
You have to be able to do both.
You've got to be able to do that. Again, it comes back to your point of having young players.
Yeah.
You can't just have a full squad of players that need to develop. You need some players who
they're ready
to do it now. You need some players for them to learn off.
Absolutely.
Atif says, here's the bottom line. Bruno should play centre midfield with Mainu and Ahmad as an attacking midfielder. And discipline. Anything else is BS. That's a big call from Atif. That sounds a little bit of a FIFA call to me.
I mean, I think we'd get. I personally do think Bruno would be better suited to a deeper role, but
I agree.
Just because he has the capabilities of pulling the strings. I know people won't agree because he doesn't do it often enough, but yeah, look, it's never going to happen anyway, so it's a non-conversation. So I don't agree with that midfield thing.
We've got another super chat. Super chats are flying in here, people. Untamed Voice says, claiming this is for squad rotation when next week's international break, and he didn't say, but I'm going to add it on. He also hooked the two centre-backs off early midweek.
Yeah, just say, yeah.
The man's off his rocker. Can't wait for him to get sacked. Not my words, Untamed Voice's words. Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
no punches pulled there.
Yeah, we've been saying it anyway, but he's been saying it the past few games, but it's so easy to see through. We keep saying rotation. It's so easy to see through.
But it comes back to what you said earlier, though. In the FA Cup final, the way we set up against Man City, and no one had us to win. Obviously, I didn't have us to win that game either. We can do it against Man City. We can definitely do it against Villa.
I agree.
So it's not like, just to clarify, I do expect us to lose, but it's not past the realms of possibility that we can beat them if he tactically sets us up the right way. But my biggest issue is he's too stubborn. He won't change his ways.
I learnt my lesson against City because I was sat on the countdown like we are right now, and I was miserable. I was so miserable, and I was being moody, and I was saying, we ain't getting this, we ain't winning this cup, we ain't getting anything today. And then within 10 minutes of us playing, I went, I think we'll win today.
Yeah.
So, you know, I got sat down that day, and you know what?
And hopefully we get sat down today as well.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. Well, I've not even put myself in a position to get sat down, because I've sat on the fence and said, do you know what? He's proved me wrong against City. Maybe he can prove me wrong today, because yesterday I said, I think we'll get battered. In fact, I actually said I think it'll be a cricket score. But
wow.
let's hope that they can set up in a way which, you know, exceeds our expectations and gets us playing. Another few super chats here. One from Ryan. We look like we don't know what to do on the ball. There's no patterns from the training ground, no consistent transition plays. I actually think we look worse off the ball than on the ball. If you had to pick one in particular, I'd say off the ball is our biggest issue. Mr. Ferg with another super chat. Thank you very much, mate. Says PSG, Leverkusen, Arsenal, City, Villa, Girona, Barcelona, West Ham. How is that not true? Also, I'm not Spanish. Do you know what? Fair play, mate. I'll give you that. West Ham, where West Ham in the league right now? Are they
did just
really
above
well?
us, but I think Lopetegui's actually got off to a poor start.
Yeah.
I know they just beat Ipswich yesterday. I believe it was like 5-2 in the end, 4-2. I can't remember.
Well, this is the United stand. This isn't that
exactly.
football.
We don't need to be.
Let's stick to Man United. We're not looking at West Ham here, mate. I can see why he dropped De Ligt and Martinez, both being poor lately. Amazed Bruno is playing. He needs a rest. Fingers crossed for today. It's like you said before, mate. Obviously, you know, seen Rashford get hooked at half time. You've seen Martinez and De Ligt get hooked, and then they've been dropped for such a big game. But Bruno Fernandez is just the one you can't get rid of. Poor performance after poor performance.
He's been our worst player
Two
this
red
season
cards
now.
in a row. Still first name on the team
In
sheet.
terms of form, he's actually been our worst player. Like, if you actually think about it logically, I know a lot of people say Martinez has been awful, but Bruno's got sent off.
It's madness, isn't it?
So.
But then again, it's like, if Bruno does decide today that, do you know what, I'm going to put in a 10 out of 10 performance,
well,
United will win if Bruno decides
We're
to
going to
show
learn
up
a lot about these players today. I mean, you know, under Ollie, when we lost 4-1 against Watford in that last game, you can see that the players weren't playing for him, and they're essentially down tools, in my personal opinion. So we're going to learn a lot about these players. Yes, a lot of these players that he has selected have got previous managers sacked. But the flip side, I don't want to hear anyone saying, it's the players' fault, it's this players. He's chosen these players. Like, that entire bench is his signings, isn't it, pretty much? Like, I'd say like 70% of the bench are his players. So he's decided to go with the sort of ever so reliant players, and hopefully they deliver, because it's going to be him that gets the, you know, the sort of backlash, so to speak, off the back of that. So yeah, it's going to be difficult.
Let me just check the chat. I'm just going to check as well if we've got anything extra on the team news. So this is coming from Sky Sports. We had a little bit there about the defence, just a little bit extra. Obviously, that is going to be the focal point today. All eyes are going to be on Harry Maguire and Johnny Evans. Here's a quote from Gary Neville on Sky Sports. He says, Maguire and Evans starting hints at desperation. It's kind of what we said about it being, you know, one last roll of the dice. Gary actually says, at one point, I thought Gary and Phil Neville might be the starting fullbacks. If you had said to me 5 or 6 weeks ago that you would end up with Johnny Evans and Harry Maguire, I would have said there must be 4 injuries to the others. But the fact is, De Ligt and Martinez have been dumped to the bench. You can't really argue with the decision from a footballing perspective. Watching the goals conceded in Porto were horrific. But optically, looking from the point of view of the plan this season was for Erik ten Hag to establish his style of play, shift them up the pitch and make them more aggressive. And like we said, it's like we've gone backwards. It's like Mark said, actually. Mark made the point of,
said the same
you know,
thing,
you know, you may as well die on your sword at this point. All eyes are going to be on those centre-backs today. Really interesting game, this. I mean, could we be looking at, in half hour's time, the last time Erik ten Hag manages a Manchester United side? I've just missed a super chat there. Check my chat, please, says JD. If I can find it, mate. I mean, we have had a few technical difficulties and a little bit of a switch around last minute today, mate. If you can drop it in the chat, just a normal chat, I will keep my eye out for it now because I'm not seeing it on my screen. If you drop that in, we'll get it covered really quick. If not, mate, we'll go back, we'll scrape together all the super chats we missed and we'll cover them just before we start on the forum. We'll just make sure everyone's chats get included. But let me just go, before we do go over to Mark, let me just check if there's any more news coming from Sky. Ten Hag just saying Villa's going to be a challenge. We know this. Rashford, the only part of Man United's left-sided problems. So the panel on Sky Sports identifying Marcus Rashford as the biggest problem on that left-hand side.
Yeah. Do you want to do the one to watch and score, and then we can throw it?
Well, that's interesting because it's going to be very off the cuff. That you've not really had, we didn't speak about it before the show because it was a bit, everything was a bit last minute. Who is your one to watch today?
I don't even know. I've just suggested it, but I'm going to say Højlund. Mainly because of his finishing. Obviously, the XG suggests that we create a lot of chances. Højlund did score the other day as well, so I'm hoping they can carry on that form. So, I'm going to say Højlund.
I agree with that because, if we get one chance today, if I had to pick who it falls to, I'd probably pick Højlund.
Yeah.
I'm going to pick one almost in not a negative way, but, my play to watch Bruno Fernandez because I think he really is. I think he's the make or break today. Bruno's got to be disciplined today. He's got to be disciplined, and going off recent performances, if he plays like he has been playing, we're going to get beat. But then again, it's with Bruno Fernandez, it's and he doesn't do it as often anymore. But if he turns up, it's the technique he's got. We all know the technique he's got. He can score goals, he can set goals up. If he just turns up, he can be the one that gets us ticking. One last super chat before we head over to Mark, people, because Mark is live now if you want to move over to that stream. Hamza says, I agree we're playing better football. Oh, no, it's just the one that came up before. We've already covered it. Right, everybody, so we are going to wrap up. If you want to go over and raid Mark's chat, let me think, what can you raid Mark's chat with? Raid Mark's chat with Tull for new Manchester United manager. Go and tell Mark that Tull is going to be the next Manchester United manager starting from tomorrow. With Usman as my assistant coach. Ruud van Nistelrooy. I don't know what we'll do with Ruud. We'll do something. But thank you very much for watching. I'm looking forward to seeing this game, people. Could we be seeing Erik ten Hag's last game in charge of Manchester United? Whatever happens, it's going to be interesting. Come on, United. Let's get the 3 points. Let's get the season underway. That's what I want. Let's get a couple of goals. Let's put a big performance in. Let's have change momentum before the international break. This has been United Stand, the biggest fan channel in the world. I hope you've enjoyed. I'll see you on the fan forum. See you later.